Hey guys, it's Lady Ambrosia. I hope you all are doing well. I'm really excited today because I have a special guest, Dreoilin. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi guys, it's me, Dreoilin. My name is Dreoilin, which is the Irish for Wren. So if you want to call me Wren or Dreoilin, either's fine.
Awesome. Awesome. And you have a channel here on YouTube as well.
I just started one today.
Yay. And we are going to be talking about your path. And so why don't you go ahead and just define your path for us?
Well, defining it's kind of a loaded question in itself, but my path is something you would call Sinnsreachd, and it's a Gaelic form of polytheism. It's Gaelic polytheistic tribalism. So people get often hung up on that word tribalism, but if you put it in terms of family and then extended family, and then even the people within your community. So you would have like Jerb clan, Tuha, Pubble. Those are things that all relate to tribe and family. So we're really big with like who our people are.
And what resources, like if someone was looking into getting into this tradition and learning more about it and getting more information on it, like what resources as far as other vloggers here on YouTube or, authors or movies, or how could you find more info about this?
Well, Sinnsreachd used to have a home base, but the page is down. So I copied everything from a friend and put it up on my blog for the time being. So we don't really have a website, but we have a Facebook presence and we have a Google Plus. I keep a blog. The only person that's been published from our organization or movement would be a gentleman named Robert Barton, who wrote Dance of Oak and Wren, Rites of Dreoilin. So that's, other than that, we don't really have a very large web presence, but we've been around for quite a while.
And do you know of any other like vloggers here on YouTube who talk about this?
No, I'm going to be the first one.
Awesome. Exciting. So, what brought you to this?
Well, when I was around the age of like 11 or 12, I used to study with my grandmother a lot, but I didn't grow up necessarily in the Sinnsreachd tradition. My mom's family being Italian and Greek, I grew up with my grandma on that side of the family, learning a lot of stuff that's Stragarian. So a lot of the Strega stuff was ingrained in me since day one, but around the age of 12, 13, I started working with my grandmother a lot. Around the age of 18, she encouraged me to look into the culture and the traditions of my father's side of the family. I grew up without my father being present, and there was always this like burning urge of like, well, who am I and where do my people come from and what is their culture all about? So my dad being predominantly Irish and the other parts being Welsh and Scottish, I looked into the Celts and then did as much reading as possible. I joined the Druid Order when I was 18. I'm still technically with them, even though I don't really take part in the things that they do. But yeah, just the urge to know the concept of ancestors brought me to, it's something my heart was searching for.
Yeah, definitely. What are maybe some like values or virtues that are held as important within this tradition?
I would probably say all Celtic people probably subscribe to very similar virtues and ethics and moral code. There's things like honor, truth and honor and loyalty, strength and courage. We have a very big warrior type of tradition. So, yeah, those are pretty big ones. I mean, there are some. Sinnsreachd is kind of like it's a branch of Gaelic paganism. There are other forms. There's CR, Celtic Reconstructionism, and there's like Paganoch. There's all sorts of different little branches of the tree of the Celtic family of faith. So we all have a lot of things in common. You'll find things online of Celtic paganism in the traditional aspect, not the neo-pagan stuff. That will be more in line to any Sinnsreachd stuff that you might not find.
So you're saying that you belong to a tradition that is just kind of one path under Celtic paganism.
Yeah, if you looked at it from the point of view of like there's Celtic paganism, well, we are a branch of Gaelic paganism, so we don't have any Welsh influence. So we're technically just a Gaelic culture into that tradition, and
Okay.
that's a pretty big deal because its main focus is not necessarily just the faith; it's the culture, and the culture is defined by its language. So language is very important to us. Like those that speak Dreoilin, the Irish language, or Gaelic with the Scots. Um, so you would find we would use that kind of stuff in ritual predominantly. So we would have like the language, we would have all the cultures, folk traditions, and the customs, as well as its rituals. And the faith is interwoven into it. It's every aspect. But getting back to that Celtic tree of like faith, Gaelic paganism is where we are, and off of Gaelic paganism, Sinnsreachd is a branch off of that limb.
Okay. What what all would the branches consist of?
Mm. Like if you would follow the branches back to like a common root, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess the tree of it would probably go back to those Proto-Indo-Europeans. The very earliest culture we could tie a language to throughout Europe before the languages started splitting up and becoming what they are. So probably the Proto-Indo-Europeans, and their culture was somewhat warrior aspect is like. And before that, you have like this really huge Neolithic culture, and we don't know too much about their faith, but you could probably tie it to ancestor veneration and animism.
Mm-hmm. And then from that, it kind of spawned and branched off into the different traditions that you were just talking about, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And are there any like specific days that are viewed as, holy days or sacred days or days of worship or holidays?
Yeah. For us, being the Sinnsreachd tradition, being very like pretty strict about our culture, we only have the major four festivals, and we celebrate them as culturally as accurate as possible. So we would have Samhain, we would have Imbolc, and we would have Bealtaine and Lunasa. And considering this is what we have left of our culture's traditions, we would celebrate them as accurately as possible.
So the equinoxes and the solstices aren't as focused on.
We don't have them at all. Like
Okay.
culturally speaking, historically, the equinoxes and the solstices are definitely tied to that Neolithic culture. The people who built places like Newgrange and Stonehenge, the equinoxes and solstices are very tied to that time period, and even the late Bronze Age. It was when the Iron Age started coming in that agriculture was so big that there was a shift between those equinoxes and solstices to periods of complete heightened awareness of the landscape and working with animals and being at the farmstead. So the seasonal festivals of the four fire festivals started, during around that period.
And why are they considered fire festivals?
Well, that's definitely something that I think like the Gardnerians labeled it as. But you could see the commonalities that, in Imbolc, there's a concept of the hearth, the home and the fire with Briet. In Bealtaine, you have a giant agricultural shift where you have two huge bonfires and the cattle go to summer pasture and you bless them as they go to pasture. There's a fire probably for Lunasa, which is a giant feast, and it's Olympic Games kind of way. It's a big festival. And Samhain being the end of summer, there's often the last sacrifice of the year. and killing off probably any livestock that you're not going to be able to feed throughout the rest of the winter. And another, the concept of sacred fire was lit 2 different times during the year, once at Samhain and once at Bealtaine.
Mm-hmm. So within this tradition, then, do you guys kind of stick to a specific pantheon?
Yeah, we totally do. Within the Gaelic culture, our deities, our gods, are pretty much the Tuatha De Danann. And, the family tree of them, it would depend on, if do you have a personal patron, or maybe your family or your clan or your Tuatha, your tribe, they might have different deities or certain ones that you work with as a group, or even per season. So the Tuatha De Danann are definitely, our go-to gods, and we don't leave that aspect of the culture and incorporate other deities into our traditions.
Mm-hmm. So taking it back to the fire festival thing, which one would be your personal favorite? Because I think this is always an interesting question to ask, because I think it says a lot about you.
Well, originally I'm prone to jump at Samhain, but I think that was, I've been on this path for about 25 years. So Samhain used to be my favorite, but right now I would definitely say Lunas is my favorite.
And why is that?
I really like the concept of a lot of the mythology and the stories that deal with Lu as a god, and it's in honor of his foster mother who passed away, and she was clearing these fields and these lands, and it was done in these games, and these festivities were done at a place where she died, and it's a celebration, and it's touching, it's moving, and there's concept of the entire peoples coming together. It's a big community type of festival, and within the lore and the mythology, things with the stories of Lu, they really speak to me.
Would you consider Lou to be like one of your patrons?
I've worked with him often. He's definitely not one of my patrons, though. The Dagda is one of my is my number one. He's my god.
So what mythological, or I guess maybe not, maybe mythological or kind of folkloric, like entities or beings, like elves or giants, for instance, what would we find within the culture or the tradition?
Well, everybody's familiar in Ireland with the concept of the fairies, right?
Definitely.
But oftentimes there's this misconception that these fairies are these little tiny beings with these little fairies that fly around, and that's not the concept. The old tradition with the she folk, the good neighbors. A lot of times people call them the she, which is technically incorrect. The she is actually named for the mound. There's different mounds. Now, technically, those are Bronze Age and Neolithic burial mounds. But the she folk, they live under the ground. They live in the other world. So you can call them the she folk or the good neighbors. A lot of people call them that. There's lots of different names for the fairy folk. But in the traditional aspect, they look just like you and I do. They can take human form, and they can be next to you in the grocery line, and you don't know that they're there. You could be sitting next to one of them in the movies. And I'm sure as pagans, in a very wide sense of that term, we've all come across people in our lives that you walk away from a situation or an event, and you go, that person just wasn't quite right. Like, did you feel that? Like, what was wrong with that person? Like, that could have been one of the fairy folk.
So it would be typically associated with like something rubbing you the wrong way then, or no?
Yes and no. They're definitely not, if you get into the traditional lore of the fairy folk, they're not to be trusted. They have a nature just like our own. They can be fickle, they can be moody. It's not an energy you want to intentionally invite into your home. If you look into the folk traditions in Ireland, they do all sorts of things to ward them away. The use of iron, the iron horseshoe, iron nails, painting your door red, making an equal cross of rowan wood, sometimes with red ribbon on it. There's all sorts of things to like let them know, like, you know, you acknowledge them, or maybe even offerings like butter or milk or cream that you might leave out for them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not something that you willingly say, you know, hey, fairy folk, you know, I'm going to do this type of magic and please aid me. And oh, for fuck's sake.
Did your camera go off?
No, I'm here. Can you see me or no?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay. Yeah, well, my battery is going to die. So I'm going to the kitchen to find my plug, and you're coming with me.
Okay.
So yeah, ask away, and we'll keep doing this, and I'll just be mobile.
Okay. I love your fireplace. I just saw that in the background.
This is my man cave. The kids call it Daddy's man room.
I love it.
Oh, we're sneaking out into the house with 4 sleeping children and a sleeping wife.
Oh, that's dangerous.
No, it's very dangerous. My wife's a redhead. She's fiery. Oh, for fuck's sake, where's my charger? Sneaky, sneaky, sneaky. Oh, there it is. I didn't even need the room. It's right there. All right, charger. Yeah, this is the man cave. Tobacco. And hey, here's shots of cool stuff. Look, pagan stuff. Woo.
Nice.
All right. I don't have an extender, so we'll just do this at the bar. All right, the bar. All right, let's check this out. Bear with me. I'm sorry about this.
No, you're totally fine.
It was the technical difficulties that we had trying to get this chat going, you know?
Yeah, we were definitely having some technical difficulties tonight.
Okay, we are plugged in. We are good. You can see me, and I'm going to go grab a bar stool real quick and my pipe, and we'll be right with you in less than a minute.
Sure. Well, guys, I'm actually so excited that I'm able to have him on my channel. I found him through Zabora, and I was like, I really want someone to represent Celtic paganism. And I got in contact with Dreoilin, and that's how we're here now. So, and we had tons of technical difficulties tonight. It was ridiculous. It was crazy. So, but we got it figured out. Thank the gods.
Okay, the lighting's not going to be the best, but we'll do it, right?
Yeah, and that's fine. Your bar background makes me want to get myself like some rum in a cup now.
I got 2 kinds of rum right here. You can have some.
Yeah, I need some on the rocks. Okay, so we were talking about the she, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And so within this tradition, the idea of working with them seems a little foreign.
Yeah. A lot of times, like, it's, you know, it's not really seen as this concept of outsiders. Sometimes you hear a lot of pagans, druids, and all sorts of people talking about this concept of outsiders, beings that are not part of the tradition or something like that. The fairy folk aren't really like outsiders, but they're definitely something to be acknowledged and respected. Because do you really, you know, if there's all sorts of weird customs and traditions that have been handed down, and we know that they're from ancient times. Like, you don't just go to your door if someone knocks and open it. If someone knocks on your door, rings your bell, you would usually ask through the door, like, hello, who is it? Or you check through your peephole, and then you would open the door, you know? You don't just, you know, you don't just open a door to a stranger. So why would you invite a strange thing into your home?
Right. Well, and I know that, like, from what I've understood of it, they were very much considered to be more chaotic neutral.
That's a good way to put it. Mm-hmm.
Overall. So I could see how there could be some that might be malevolent and some that might be benevolent. It just would depend, just like people, like, you know, just like with human beings, we have people who heal and people who hurt. And I would imagine the same logic would be applied to that as well.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah.
So for someone who follows this path, then there would not be magic or rituals involving the Fae folk?
There might be. And there are people that are specialists that specialize in certain branches of the culture. I know a wonderful Celtic pagan. I don't really know what she describes herself as personally. Her name is Morgan. She's a published author. Most people who are Celtic pagans own her books. She has a lot of books out on the fair folk, and she kind of specializes in that area. So she writes great stuff. It's historical. She backs it up. It's documented. She quotes other authors. It's amazing the type of work she does. She's on Amazon. She's everywhere. So she definitely focuses a lot on the fairy folk. But I was going to say, with Sinnsreachd, and this concept of the good neighbors, that they live underground, like they live in the other world. At one time, the Gaelic people, the Gael, they had a pact. Like you have the Milesians that come, and there was a pact between us and the gods. And because there was wars fought, and we won the land, so we had ownership and rule of the land because we honored them. And when you see the pact broken in Ireland, when the last pagan king dies, when Christianity comes and actually takes a firm foothold and a root, and people start turning away from their ancient roots and their ancient culture that survived for thousands of years, it's when the pact is broken, you see, oh, Christianity comes. Oh, there's Viking invasions. Oh, there's rule under Cromwell, and oh, there's famines, which I'll get into that. But you see nothing but hardship, and you see the people being divided and the culture being broken. And all you have to do is look at the language. How many people in Ireland still speak their native language compared to how it was probably even the early 1800s? Mm-hmm. So the pact was broken. And once we decided to go against our original agreement with the gods, you can look at Ireland, and it broke.
And are you saying that the Fae folk had any influence in that, or is that unrelated?
I think it's because we stopped acknowledging them and honoring them in the way we culturally did as a people, especially with the concept of them also being deities. There's the three things that are extremely important to us: is the gods, the ancestors, and the good neighbors. Now it's a standing joke in Ireland, like, welcome to Ireland where the fairies are real but the old gods never existed.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I could see how that would be relevant, especially in today. I think I saw not too long ago, I think it was Ireland, I could be wrong, but I think I saw not too long ago that they just built another temple there. Maybe.
The funny thing about the Catholics in Ireland is, and they'll never admit this the way they are, but a lot of the Catholics, predominantly most of the Catholics, are involved in their folk traditions, their customs.
Oh, I totally agree.
That they're so pagan, it's not funny. Like here's an ancient holy well that existed from the Iron Age, where people used to gather to worship this deity who's a goddess connected to water, and they're going to walk around the holy well, sunwise, Jayshul, and they're going to walk around it barefoot 9 times, and they're going to chant a prayer to her. What do the Catholics do? They show up, they take their shoes off, they walk around the holy well 9 times barefoot, chanting the rosary.
Yeah, I think that the Catholics have a lot more in common with pagans than they would ever want to admit to, for sure.
Well, sure. Ireland was never conquered by Rome, so the type of Christianity that they had early on, they didn't look to Rome. The type of Christianity Ireland had was a Celtic Christianity, and it was a lot like a cult, and it was very spread out, and you see the social structure change very mildly from the Druid being replaced by the professor or the doctor of poetry. So the Druid, like, Not that they didn't exist anymore. It's just that the social structure changes, and then this person just steps into the role.
And define what a druid is.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Well,
I'm very big on defining and definitions, because
okay.
I think that even from person to person, sometimes people can have varying levels of definitions. Just like I call myself and consider myself a witch, but if you ask 10 witches what a witch is, you're going to get 10 different answers. And I'm not saying that there's only one right answer out of those 10 answers. I think they're all kind of right in their own right. I just think it's interesting to hear about how people define labels. And
I'll take the route of traditionalism, and in Sinnsreachd, we separate ourselves from the word druid because it's an anglicized word. There's a lot of connotations to it with neo-druids, and we don't associate with that. So for us, the concept of a druid is we use the language, and the language is a drui. If you want to say D-R-A-O-I, or the old spelling is D-R-U-I fada. So drui is our word for druid. And a druid in the cultural and the traditional sense for the customs of the people, they were the most educated of the people. They were often advisors to kings. They were counselors. The best way you could probably put it is they were like a rabbi and less like a priest. So they held law as judge, or sometimes acted as lawyer. They were arbiters of peace when it need be, but they also trained warriors, some of them. Men and women could be druid. You would have a bandrui, which is a female druid. So they were, there's mention that them being the most elite of their people, being able to speak and write in many different languages, even though they didn't write anything down on their own.
so in a sense, they're kind of like a rabbi meets a scholar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They were like the mediators between the gods and the people. The people would come to the drui because the drui were connected to the gods. You didn't make a sacrifice. You brought it to the drui or one of the sacrificers, and they made it on your behalf.
So you're saying that they still also maintained a spiritual level of influence over the community as well. So they were a multifaceted.
Yeah, and you had to train for a lot of years. It's like you can't just read a couple books and be a druid. And a lot of neo-pagans and neo-druids have this concept of, oh, I like the title. You can't just put on a black belt and go to a dojo and say I'm a black belt, because the sensei is going to know, hey, you're lying. So
that's exactly how I feel about the whole high priest and high priestess stuff, because I see that a lot too, where people claim to be a high priest or a high priestess.
Yeah,
just because they think it sounds good.
And for us,
and there's credentials. There's
right.
Credentials. Like you have to earn a title. These are not just like gifted to you. There's things that involve being a high priestess.
Right. And for us in the Sinnsreachd tradition, if you want to claim such a title, you have to do the work even scholarly within a university or a college. And you have to have some sort of something on paper that says, these are my credentials. And then it's when a community can accept you. It's not, well, I'm a druid now. Well, that's great. But if you're not serving a community, then you're just somebody who's smart.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So with that being said, everyone who follows this tradition would not be a druid.
Correct.
So would there just be folkish practices influenced, or is there a separate branch of energy manipulation or magic within this tradition?
Well, yeah, there are like the folkish is a great word to use for it. These customs and traditions that we have that are passed down to us it's the small things. It's the things we do daily that define us as a culture. And number one is using the language. So like when I'm speaking to my wife or my children, I use as much of the language as I'm proficient in. Like when you pass a graveyard, you might say a prayer for the dead. I wear a Celtic ring necklace because this kind of connects me to my ancestors. It's small little things, like it's the prayers that I say over my sleeping children and what the words are and what they mean. There's so many small little, here's a great tradition that we have. When a guest comes over, we have a welcoming cup. A lot of people use either a drinking horn or a Scottish quaich. Quake. I don't speak Scottish. And then you offer them a welcoming cup. They come in and, you give them a blessing. You offer them a cup. They take a sip. You take a sip. And it's kind of like they're welcomed into the home at that point.
So what would you call that? Like practice, just focus cultural practices?
Yeah. It's just the cultures, customs, and traditions. There's so many of them. And the thing is like, there's a lot of them that are passed down to us. There's some of them like an Imbolc with Breath's brought. It's like a cloak. Then you leave it out. You leave it out during Imbolc for 7 years to make it fully charged, and it's used for people that are very sick. There's all sorts of little things that we have that define us as a culture, as a people, that you don't see in neo-paganism. To them, it's just the faith, and it's a very bastardized version of what our ancestors did and what we do still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can see that for sure. For sure. So what would separate Celtic magic from other types of magic? Or are we just kind of saying that you have druidry, but if you are not a druid, if you don't have, if you have not gone through the proper training and you don't have the proper credentials, then we're not really calling it Celtic magic. We're calling it cultural focused practices.
Well, it depends on the actual practice, because even the poets, the Fili or the Olav, which was the highest ranked poet after 12 years, they had their own magic. Blacksmiths had their own magic. I'm sure even women who were in charge of knitting and looming and working with the wool had their own magic. Magic wasn't something that in a traditional aspect was separate. It was something that was going on all of the time, every day. And you could either be a part of it or you could ignore it.
Definitely. I just think that's very interesting overall, because I didn't know that. Because I see you follow a Reconstructionist path, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
I see people practicing Celtic witchcraft. And as a Reconstructionist, you say that was not a thing in Ireland.
Well, we did have witches, they were, maybe there's a concept of maybe they were in some sort of formal training at one point and they just dropped off the map and stopped their training. That's very possible. There was also priestcraft at one point too. But it was one of those things that if you had some sort of occult or esoteric type of knowledge, you just did it. The mom might do it for her child, or she might go to her local druid of in their clan or their tribe and sit down with him or her and explain to them what's going on with the sick child, or what's going on. Maybe their harvest is getting bad, we're not stuck in an Iron Age time period. We're still talking about people that existed in the 1700s. We're talking about people that exist right now.
Yeah.
Like earlier today when we were trying to get online and we had these, technological problems.
Problems.
Right. Some scientists will say science, and for people in Sinnsreachd will say science and magic.
Definitely. Yeah, I always make jokes in our house when like our keys go missing or random things like that it's the damn fairies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm following. So, okay. If you had to describe the Celtic pantheon, how would you describe it?
Well, I see a lot of people often focus on the gods. They pay strict attention to the gods.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, I think people are either faking it or lying, because a lot of times the gods could be arsed. They didn't give a fuck about your problems or, You know, you're not praying to them or trying to petition them for like, you know, please this or that. It's no, you would pray for strength or courage and like for them to be with you during this time period. But the Celtic pantheon of gods, I think people pay too much attention to it. They make it more important than it has to be. I think it can be as simple as you just acknowledge them and you know that they're there when they want to be there. Your intimate relationships should be with the spirits of the land that you live in, and your ancestors, because they're the direct connection to the other world for you.
And would you consider the spirits of the land to be like the good neighbors or not?
I would say yes and no. I would say yes, the good neighbors, because people that tie them specifically to location, I can understand that certain events happen here or there within Ireland or Scotland or wherever, and a certain spirit is tied to a location. But I think other spirits came with us when we came here because they're with us. But at the same time, there are spirits that were here on native land, and even the natives have talked about spirits that were here when they got here. So when I say spirits of the land, I mean in a holistic sense about where I live, because I have experienced things that are not my culture. And I usually leave an offering and say, I'm out. This is your place, not mine.
So what would the spirits of the land consist of?
I'm not sure what you mean. Like energy-wise, perhaps, or
Like you live on the East Coast. I won't say exactly where, because I don't know how comfortable you feel about putting that type of information online, but
I'm
you live on the
upstate.
East Coast. Okay, upstate New York.
Yeah, I'm upstate. Yeah.
So spirits of the land for you might be what?
I would say the spirits of the land for me are definitely the good neighbors. They're here. And I would say that there's definitely tribal presence of the native tribes that are in this area. I think their stuff is still very, very present. A lot of the places that I work are in different pieces of state land, different wildlife refuges. And some of them butt up against native property, which obviously was all their property anyway. So pretty much anywhere you go here, where I live, a lot of places, streams and creeks, towns, and even roads are named after native things. So not to at least acknowledge and then honor that would be foolish, because this is where I live.
So we're kind of talking about like ancestors, but not in a literal sense.
Yeah, but I would definitely say that there's probably more to it than that. Maybe even
Like maybe spirits that they worked with,
yeah, that too. And I was
or
going to say,
residual energy left from their.
oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah, because I've been to places that have ritual, and within the first 10 minutes of having a ritual, presence has been known of get out. So you leave offerings and you bail, and you don't go back there.
I live in Indiana, and like northern state, we have these dunes in Anderson, and there's been a lot of talk about the good neighbors there. Now, this is from Native American culture and Native American spirits, so they have another name for them. They called them the blue people.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard about them or not, but there's several blog posts online and stuff talking about them, but I have actually been there, and it was quite an experience for sure. So I feel like fae, is this big umbrella term that can encompass many things.
Yeah.
And I've had this conversation with other people as well, and I feel like they are part of the good neighbors, but they're not, kind of. Like, I feel like it's the same way with different human races.
Yeah, I mean, those were probably their good neighbors. Yeah.
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 And I kind of feel that way too about, how do you feel about this? Let me ask you this. So the Norse culture has dwarves and elves and giants.
Right.
Would you consider that to be fae?
Dwarves, elves, and giants. Well, number one, I don't have a very formal education or understanding of Norse culture to make that assumption, but they would have to be definitely within their culture. I would assume that those beings are Fae-like because they're not their gods.
Yeah, from my understanding of it, it seems that the giants were almost kind of like the Titans from the Greek pantheon.
Okay.
So I don't know how I feel about the giants, but I feel like the elves and dwarves could definitely fit within that.
Yeah, I don't know anything. I don't know anything about giants.
Every now and then there's this funny meme that floats around on Facebook that talks about how, this presidential candidate said he's going to do this, and this presidential candidate said he's going to do this, but Odin said he'd defeat all the ice giants, and where are the ice giants?
Yeah, I've seen that. I love that.
Yeah, I think
I love
that's
that.
pretty great. So if someone was like looking to find a community of people from this tradition, where would you send them to look for that?
Well, that's funny that you bring that up because a gentleman just asked me that on the Sinnsreachd Google Plus page that I run. And he wanted to know if there was any members in downstate New York, right out of the city. And I'm like, I don't know, but you can check with the Facebook page because, I know the people that run that. I'm very close with them. And if they don't know, then I'll just start doing some poking around. So you don't really know where the people are because we are in the United States and we are spread out. I can tell you here in the Northeast, we have a pretty big presence, especially within Massachusetts itself. But I would probably tell them to come to the Google Plus page. I'd tell them to go to the Facebook page, and I would work with them to try to find people within their communities. And if not, then you have the joy and the pleasure of making one yourself.
Yeah, and I definitely think Witchbox could be a good resource as well.
I never really thought about that. I don't know too much about that, but I have a friend that uses it. But yeah,
Yeah, Witchbox is kind of like an online platform
yeah,
where you can find local groups, covens or kindreds
right.
um, or open rituals, and you can contact them. I know, like, I live in Indiana, like I said, and there's, I think, like 30 different groups, which I think 13 or 14 of those are actually Gardnerian. So
Yeah,
there, we have a large Gardnerian pagan population out here, because that's almost half of all of our pagan, community, I guess you could say.
I don't know which types of witchcraft or Wicca that we have around here. I'd have to ask a couple of my friends that have been in covens for probably over 30 years. I do know that there is, I think, a branch of Silver Ravenwolf's coven, the White Stag, is here. Um, there's a lot of neo druids here from either Obod or ADF, and I don't get on well with them. So there's that.
Why do you say that?
To put it very bluntly, they piss on the roots of their tradition.
And as a Reconstructionist, you would be offended by that.
Oh yeah, I'm often offended by it because I've also belonged to Obod since I was 18. So I'm still an active member there, and I know the stuff that they put out there. And I'm not saying that it doesn't hold a value or it's not good for the individual or some kind of even blanket esoteric knowledge can be gained, but to call it what it is, to use a nomenclature, they use, Gaeliga or Gaelic words for their this or their that, just to blanket their means of culture. I don't even say culture, but I would say their order, because they're lacking in culture and they're lacking in the folk customs. And it's, if you put it this way, it would be like if all the Catholic Church got together and say, all right, the rest of the parish can get out, we're having priestcraft. It's a druid order. Where's the representation of the people? So it doesn't. It's not a traditional aspect of who our ancestors were and how they worked. There was no druid orders until the 1700s.
Yeah, I know that like within our pagan community here, I have not, I'm pretty eclectic anyway, and I'm a Libra, so balance and harmony is my jam. So when there's like craziness going on, I usually just remove myself from the situation. But I know that within our pagan community here, there is a group that is a little bit controversial just because of how conservative, I guess, their beliefs are. Like, so there's a shop called the Magic Candle out here, and this shop is also a school. It's Wiccan, it's Dianic Wiccan focused. And so within that, they pretty much, you can't really enter that if you're a male.
Right.
Right. And then also it goes even like the one, like the Magic Candle, for instance, you can go in there and buy their stuff. They have products and things that are made by the local community and their coven. And it's a really cool shop. It's a mom and pop shop, and it's a little bit clusterfuck when you go in there because there's just so much stuff in such a small space, because it's actually in a house. And the people who own the shop actually live there. And like the whole downstairs is the shop. And then like they live on the upstairs, and then they have a basement, and that's where like the school part is.
Okay.
Where they have a education program that you can enroll in. And it's interesting because so they are a very, I would say, an even more conservative, radical branch of Dianic Wiccans, because if you are a non-menstruating woman, you also can't join.
Is that something traditional to that culture?
Not that I mean, I'm not super familiarized with it because I'm not a Dianic Wiccan, but this is just something that I know of in the in our local community. And yeah, so I mean, I have no issues with them whatsoever. I think that like here's my whole take on religion in general and spirituality in general. I could care less who or what you do or don't believe in, as long as you're not, trying to oppress or take away basic human rights. So if you feel comfortable and you feel called to walk a Dianic path in a circle of other menstruating women, then I think that's totally fine. I don't see any issue with that. But I do think that some people in the community who have wanted to apply to their school program, because they have like a little year and a day program that you can join, I have friends in the LGBT community, and a few of my gay male friends have like wanted to apply to the school, and they've been turned away, and they've been kind of upset by it. And I kind of feel for them, but I also kind of feel like it's not for them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I can fully understand that concept of like energy attracts like energy. Like if I have a tuning fork and I go bing and it's in the key of G, this G will automatically ring. So if it's...
But I also feel like this too, and this is my own personal, this has nothing to do with anything else, but I feel like, the source of the gods, the great spirit, the gods, the divine, whatever you want to call it, I feel like it does not discriminate between male, female, LGBT, white, black, orange, purple. So I've always just kind of thought that custom to be very like foreign and strange to my thinking and my mindset.
Yeah.
And I see that also within the Abrahamic faith, where they like to demonize certain types of people. And I just have a hard time, like, I support your right to follow your religion. Not saying you as in like you personally, but just like in general, I support their right to follow their religion and their freedom of speech to talk about it. But that doesn't mean that I think that exclusionary practices like that, do I think that's ethical? No.
I don't think the gods care much about human problems like that. I mean, I'm also a Freemason, and that's a completely other beast in itself, because that's an all-male fraternity. And I also belong to another group, which is all male. But within the Sinnsreachd tradition, within our cultural practices, anybody can be anything they want. And, you know, if I was starting a group and I was going to advertise like on Craigslist or something, it doesn't matter what race, what color, what sexual preferences you have. It's, if your heart calls out to this path and you want to be a part of it, then join us.
And what like general advice would you have to give someone who was looking to go down this path? If they came to you and they were like, can you give me some advice about this?
Well,
What would be some good pointers?
Well, first and foremost, I would say you have to have some sort of spark, some sort of driving force within your heart that calls you to this path. If that's not there, there's no, if it's just out of curiosity, then you might kind of just like familiarize with yourself with it, and then you'll probably bugger off. But there has to be some sort of spark or passion or drive, desire to really want to be a part of this. You want to, it's for your family, it's for your children, it's for your wife, and then her parents, and for it's a community thing. I would say that the language is very important to us, because we're still fighting on trying to have everybody be a part of the language. And it's a cultural thing, not just a spiritual thing. So my advice to them would be, you know, I don't know where they're coming from. So they might be coming from, like you said, like a coven. They could be coming from a Druid order and they're looking for something more traditional. Or maybe they're just curious about their ancestry. Maybe they're like, well, you know, I'm part Irish. So, you know, my grandpa was Irish. So maybe I should look into, you know, who, it could be something as simple as that.
Mm-hmm. So, are there any like symbols you would say, like if they were out in public and they saw someone wearing a specific necklace or something, and they could be like, oh, that person also walks this path?
It's hard to say, because a lot of the things that are Celtic and that umbrella term, which really pisses me off.
The Celtic umbrella term pisses you off?
Yeah, the concept of just the word Celtic. Everything's Celtic. There's this Celtic romanticism about everything that's Celtic, right?
Definitely.
But to answer the question real quickly on that is, you know, I wear a ring necklace, and this is something that's within my pubble. Pubble is a word meaning community or people or congregation. It's not as formal as a tuha or a tribe, because it's just more broad. So a lot of people in my pubble wear a ring necklace. It's a Celtic ring necklace. I wrote a thing on it on my blog. And it's a ring money, Celtic ring money from the Iron Age. So it's that old. I just happen to throw a bog oak bead on there that's 3,000 years old as well. So if I saw somebody with a ring necklace, I would automatically be more inclined to say, hey, you know, which tradition do you belong to? But, you know, I wear a torque, sometimes, you know, a ring, a necklace, or a neck torque. That's pretty common. But, you know, there's companies out there that make these things for fashion or for Ren fairs or fantasy. So somebody could be wearing a torque, but they're not really into the culture. They just liked it. Same thing with the common symbol of Triskele. You know, you have like Trinity knot. You'd have triquetra. They have like the Triskel. Those are symbols from that go back to the Neolithic period and through the Iron Age. So everything is Celtic.
Yeah. And okay, so you talk about how you don't care for the Celtic umbrella term.
Yeah, I mean, scholastically, Celtic means of the Celts. And these people lived from this time period to this time period, and this was their culture. Mm-hmm. After that, it's not Celtic anymore. It's something different. It would be like Brythonic, which is like the Welsh, the people from Britain, or it could be Pictish, or it could be the Gael. And those are very different things as well. So to call everything Celtic, like, Celtic thunder and Celtic dance, and it drives me nuts, because we're talking about the Iron Age. We're talking about Hallstatt period, the Latin period. Those things can be defined as Celtic. Anything after that, it's just, like I said, an umbrella term for, someone automatically hears the word Celtic and they go, Ireland. Well, guess what? That's not the home of the Celts. Their original population boom during that time period was out of Switzerland and Austria. They just don't,
So
they're not there anymore.
it's interesting then that we've developed this like term just to mean, because I feel like most people when they think of Celtic or say I feel like they think of like Ireland, Scotland.
Well, yeah, because that's where we were last, and that's where we still are. That's what's left.
It's all very interesting. Is there anything that you feel like, because we like blazed through these questions I had.
I don't know. Let me think about that real quick. Oh, that's another one. Celtic music. Jesus. No.
I'm also going to open up the chat too. So like if there's anyone who has any questions.
Yeah, I love questions.
Yeah, feel free to drop those into the chat because we would love to hear about them. I'm also, while you're thinking about that, I'm going to scroll into the chat and just see what everyone said, because honestly, I've just been paying attention to our conversation and I haven't even looked.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I just want people to know.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Comedic Witchcraft wants to know, what info do you have on Celtic people and cannibalism?
Oh, for fuck's sake. Well, I've read a few articles on that concept, and I can tell you exactly that within Ireland, all that we know about, if that existed, is 98 or 99% propaganda, Christian propaganda, Catholic propaganda. No, we did not eat our dead. We didn't, we don't eat people. We had lots of things to eat besides people. And it was never like ritualistically done. Recently there was a find, I think it was in Scotland. Don't quote me on that, but it's, there was a Neolithic period mound that they recently excavated. And I'm thinking that they did determine that a lot of the bones did show either teeth marks or some sort of like removal of the flesh. But even still, that's archaeology. It could be like they just removed the flesh from the bones. They didn't eat them. So no, we're not cannibals.
No?
No, I mean, we did take people's heads off, but
But you didn't like boil those or eat those or anything?
No. We definitely took heads, and during the Iron Age, we took heads and we kept them in chests, and we displayed them to guests, and we embalmed them, and we would hang them from our village posts and whatnot, because the head is the seat of the soul. And if you take your enemy's head, then he can't rest. So it was like a trophy. And if you look at who our enemies were at that time, it would have been Rome. And then a lot of Roman military soldiers developed, instead of taking heads of Celtic warriors, they would take their neck torque, and they would have special things on their armor to hang torques off of it.
Yeah. Can you think of anything extra that you would like to add into this?
I would definitely like to reiterate that I'm not bashing the neo-druids. I just simply wish that a lot of them would at least do some research, some homework, and look into other things that, even if they did so, that maybe their organizations or orders might change or grow towards something more traditional.
Mm-hmm.
It does seem that some of them are kind of moving in that way very slowly, but I think it's going to take groups like Sinnsreachd and other Celtic reconstructionists and Gaelic traditions to be on the forefront, on the foreground here, doing videos like this, and being out there, having a web presence, and all sorts of things that people can find us, people can contact us. I have a book list on my blog, and I have a website list on my blog for people that are interested in more of the cultural aspects of the tradition.
Well, and I will most definitely link your blog and your channel in the description bar of this. So for those of you who are watching this live, or for those of you who are watching this as like a playback version, if you're interested in that, feel free to go check those out because they will be in the description bar. And it's been super awesome having you. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
I am honored to be here, and thank you so much.
And I appreciate everyone in the chat, of course, as well. Thanks for hanging out with us. It was fun. So I don't know who my next guest will be. But if you're watching and you follow a specific traditional path, feel free to hit me up and we can work something out. So until then, I will see you guys all later. Bye.